Beneath the veil of history lies the extraordinary tale of the African Moors, a civilization whose legacy of knowledge, art, and power shaped the course of Europe. The African Moors, hailing primarily from North Africa, were an incredibly advanced society that played a pivotal role in the history of medieval Europe. In 711 AD, they crossed the Strait of Gibraltar under the leadership of General Tariq ibn Ziyad and began their conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, establishing what would become known as Al-Andalus. This marked the beginning of nearly 800 years of Moorish influence in Spain and Portugal, profoundly impacting European culture, science, and architecture. Among the most captivating figures of this era was Abd al-Rahman III, who ruled during the height of Moorish power in Spain. Under his leadership, the city of Cordoba became a beacon of enlightenment and progress, boasting the largest library in Europe at the time, with hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. The Moors were renowned for their advancements in fields such as astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and philosophy. They introduced Europe to the concept of algebra, the astrolabe, and advanced agricultural techniques that transformed the landscape. One of the hidden gems of Moorish influence is the Alhambra, a stunning palace and fortress complex in Granada. Its intricate architecture and lush gardens are a testament to the sophistication and artistic prowess of the Moors. The use of geometric patterns, calligraphy, and water features in their design has inspired countless architects and artists throughout history. The legacy of the African Moors extends beyond their architectural and scientific achievements. They played a crucial role in the cultural and intellectual exchange between the Islamic world and Christian Europe, fostering a period of remarkable coexistence and mutual enrichment known as La Convivencia. During this time, Muslim, Christian, and Jewish scholars worked together, translating and preserving ancient Greek and Roman texts, which would later fuel the Renaissance. Despite their significant contributions, the story of the Moors is often shrouded in mystery and overshadowed by the eventual Reconquista, which culminated in the fall of Granada in 1492. The expulsion of the Moors and the erasure of their cultural footprint marked the end of an era, but their impact on European civilization remains undeniable. As we uncover the hidden stories and celebrate the profound legacy of the African Moors, we gain a deeper appreciation for the interconnectedness of our shared history.
Well, hello there. Thank you for joining me today. That clip you heard, the Moors, they seem to drop off around 1492 now, don't they? Wonder why that is. There's a traditional story of the discovery of America that goes that the explorer Christopher Columbus made landfall, and remember the name Columbus for a minute here, made landfall in the early morning, October 12, 1492. So I guess we pick up the pace here at 1492. Keep in mind the images of the Statue of Liberty means liberty enlightening the world, erected in 1886. Largely displaced the personified Columbia as a female symbol of the United States by around 1920. Although Lady Liberty was seen as an aspect of Columbia, like Christopher Columbus. And Columbia, keep in mind, talked about this a lot, was a melanate or black Indian or Moor before she was whitewashed to reflect a white European woman. I have some interesting links down below. One of them is what the Moors were up to and all the people, how the Moors were here before Christopher Columbus. The most significant one, there's a major Moroccan geographer and map guy by the name of Sharif al-Idris. He wrote a book of his that a group of marine navigators from Morocco, the land of the fez hats, right next door to Mauritius, Mauritania. Yeah, I got to pronounce that right. So on the fourth day, wait. He wrote a book that a group of marine navigators from Morocco set sail onto the Atlantic Ocean from Lisbon. So they'd evidently been in Lisbon. That's where they trace, anyways. On the fourth day, they reached an island where they met a translator speaking to them in Arabic, which suggests that its residents were Muslims from North Africa, most likely from Morocco. And that piece I has all kinds of things, the whole history of supposedly the Moors traveling around before Christopher Columbus. So, in the news, they're talking about young men in America are less active in the workplace, less educated, and more lonely. Well, I've been saying this for years. When you have a baby in probably all hospitals now, I believe they've been feminizing the men and masculinizing the women. How hard would it be? They're in the back room with those babies, slicing at their poor little penises and giving them circumcision and all kinds of horrors in the back room. Welcome to life. Talk about trauma when babies are first born. So yeah, they haul them in that back room, inject them full of all those vaccines and stuff. It is perfectly logical, to me at least, that they're giving the boys estrogen and they're giving the girls a big shot of testosterone. Just look at the dynamics of our shapes, okay? If you look at my face, for example, well, don't look at it now, it's pretty ugly looking, but I have a typical female jawline, okay? It's tiny. I don't have big honking male teeth. The women now are getting those jawlines and all those big teeth. So, yeah, they have been over the last, because I looked at the picture of my dad. He was 6'1" or so. He had a typical male at the time body. He had the longer male arms, the longer male legs. Well, the women all have those now. And he had the straight across shoulders. So, yeah, they have been slowly morphing our DNA. But anyway, not my point for today, because they've also gotten us to castrate our dogs. That removes their testosterone and their energy. So yeah, of course men are going to not have as much energy now because they're getting all of this testosterone. In the news, Who You Gonna Call is talking about a mystery disease X spreading in the Congo. And who is struggling to trace its origin? Well, why don't you just trace it directly right back to the United States and let's just cut off all the different discussions about this, right? Disease X in the Congo. Aren't they kind of busy there with the war and stuff? So now they're probably going to say, oh, it's spreading in the Congo. Everybody in the Congo must get a vaccine. So I guess the people they don't brutally murder, they can get them with the vaccine, right? There's always got to be a way to conduct eugenics for these people. So yeah, it's spreading. So everybody in the Congo, come get your vaccines. They supposedly caught the guy that pulled off the robbery. Well, let's take a look at his name. Luigi Mangione is the person's name. What does Luigi Mangione mean? Well, Mangione is a playful Italian word that means big eater or glutton. It is a combination of the verb mangare, which is to eat, and the suffix one, which is used to describe things that are big. So, what does Luigi mean? Luigi is a masculine Italian given name. It is the Italian form of the German name, Ludwig. Though Latinization, it became Ludovicus, or, let me scroll down here, Ludoviscus, corresponding to the French name Louis, and its anglicized variation means Louis. So Luigi, Luigi. Okay, so Luigi Luigi Mangione means big eater or glutton. Yeah, because United Healthcare actually is a pretty big glutton. If you saw in the last show that I did, I talked about how they came out in a private thing talking about we're going to do what we want to do. So, yeah, this is all coded. And of course, it's Italian because we're all being run. This particular cult running this thing is the Italian mafia, right? So big eater or glutton. Yeah, they did grab a whole lot of money, right? They're making billions of dollars in profit. They run Medicare and Medicaid in this country pretty much. And United Healthcare, Medicaid, and Medicare are two of the most popular health insurance programs in the entire United States. So there you go. So let's get to the subject today of the Moors. The Black Moors of Europe could be thought of like blacks in America. One reason the black tag is applied to the Moors is because of the Catholic powers that were at the time. And they tried to call them that to erase the truth. So the Moors and science, I was looking at that. Remember a couple shows ago, I talked about there was that famous quote about, well, we got to make them take off those fez hats and those turbans, right? Well, it occurred to me this they're always talking about the Moors and the science, and oh, they're just geniuses when they were, and I'll have more about that in a second. When they were over there in Spain, they came up with all these books and these sciences. Well, I've read it very differently today. I read it this way. They did all those books and everything because that was exactly when they captured history and started reworking things. We didn't need doctors and stuff to treat us. We had that fully managed. That was when they introduced history and all this medicine and the sciences. Besides the fact that psychopaths always like to puff themselves up to be much bigger than they were. So their claim to fame in Spain, that kind of rhymes, claim to fame in Spain in the 1400s about all these books and stuff, well, that should be a huge red flag to us. But I'll keep reading here. Because before then, there weren't those books and stuff, okay? But first, I keep circling this 1,000 points of light because I found this piece that says this. It says that Jesus is actually played by Lucifer, and it made a great deal of sense. And I'll be getting down to that in a minute here. So I circled back over this 1,000 points of light again. The 1,000 points of light was a slogan used frequently by former President George H.W. Bush to praise volunteerism and individualism. Bush first used the phrase in his 1988 speech accepting the Republican nomination to the White House. In that speech, Bush differentiated himself from liberals by saying that he valued small government and individual liberty. Bush called his philosophy 1,000 points of light, and his nonprofit is dedicated to encouraging volunteerism, and it was named Point of Light. And then during a July 5th, a couple of years ago, President Trump or Donald Trump attacked Bush saying, 1,000 points of light. I never quite got that one. What the hell is that? Trump said. Has anyone ever figured that one out? And it was put out by a Republican, wasn't it? I know one thing. Make America great again. We understand. Putting America first, we understand. They're just playing us, okay? Because here's the deal. Looking at this light business and what they're saying, it brought me back to this whole Jesus thing. You know, the one that we're absolving all of our sins from. What a crock. they always start off with how sinful we are, right? Just like when they talk about all of this stuff, they always become very inclusive. Like, oh yeah, we're all this way. No, we are not. Okay. It's not how it works. But that is how you start to entrap other people, is you start using inclusive language. And I rebel from inclusive language, and I suggest that you do also. When somebody says, yeah, we're all kind of like psychopaths, I'd stop them and say, no, that's not exactly true. I wouldn't just accept it, because when you accept it, that means you're agreeing with it. So let's get to this Lucifer and his Lucifer Jesus business here. So light means Lucifer. The Latin term Lucifer originates from two distinct words, lux, meaning light, and fere, meaning to bring, meaning bearer of light or morning star. In ancient times, it was used to denote Venus, the planet visible in the morning sky just before sunrise. Despite popular misconceptions, the Latin Lucifer does not inherently denote evil. Instead, it has been historically misappropriated and conflated with biblical narratives, transitioning from its light-bearing origin to an embodiment of the devil. The meaning of Lucifer significantly varies across languages. It retains its original Latin definition in some, while in others, such as English, it has taken on a predominantly negative connotation, being associated with Satan. The origin of the Lucifer myth. Lucifer is usually described as a fallen angel, and the Judeo-Christian narrative of an angel falling from heaven probably has its origins in the Babylonian myth of Etan, E-T-A-N-A. So they're saying that the myth likely comes from the Babylonians. This ancient king strove to be higher than the supreme god called Anu, A-N-U, by riding on the wings of an eagle. However, he was filled with fear and was forced to return to Earth. In the original Hebrew Old Testament, Lucifer is called Hallel, H-E-L-E-L, meaning shining one. Furthermore, a direct translation of Lucifer from Latin into English gives us the phrase light bearer or light bringer. This notion of light bringing is a reference to Lucifer's depiction as the planet Venus, the second brightest object in the night sky after the moon. As Venus is often visibly shown before dawn, Lucifer is given the epithet morning star to describe how he brings the light of a new day. There's a quote, Isaiah 14:12. How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to earth, you who once laid low the nations. It should be noted that the King James Bible, remember I was talking about that yesterday, where they were tricking things, right? So the King James Bible replaces morning star and the son of dawn with, O Lucifer, son of the morning. Despite the protests of some biblical scholars, earlier translations show the two descriptions to be interchangeable, with the quoted passage appearing to compare the fall of Lucifer with that of King Etan, that's E-T-A-N-A. Thus, Lucifer's celestial status as a morning star that brings the dawn is clear. Confusion arises when Jesus is described in the same way. The quote is, I, Jesus, have sent my angel to give you this testimony for the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David and the brightest morning star. And that's from Revelations 22:16. And another quote, may this flame be found still burning by the morning star. The one morning star who never sets, Christ your Son, who, coming back from death's domain, has shed his peaceful light on humanity. And that is a Easter proclamation from the Romans. The two figures comparative mythology. Using the above quotes, one could suggest that Lucifer and Jesus are the same entity. A further connection can be made if we consider their comparative mythologies. As described earlier, Lucifer was thrown out of heaven, and the quote is, and the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Revelation 12:7. I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Luke 10:18. Christian tradition tells us that Lucifer became Satan after his fall, although that connection is also rather shaky. Nevertheless, Jesus was descended from heaven to walk the earth and to be a God among men. And here's a quote, but when the time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under law, to redeem those under law that we might receive the full rights of sons. Galatians 4:4. I have come as light into the world so that everyone who believes in me will not remain in darkness. To further blur the line between these precipitous beings, Satan is also called the God of the world in Corinthians, which would appear to contradict the notion that Jesus is God's divine presence on earth. In sum, Jesus and Lucifer are both light-centric gods called the morning star that descended to the human plane of existence. If they are indeed the same entity, was all that followed in the New Testament the work of a deceiver? Were Jesus' miraculous deeds only meant to coax the masses into following him? At the very least, one might question whether a true God would flaunt his powers in such a manner. It would follow that Christianity could be a Luciferian cult. When considering the fall of Rome, the Dark Ages, the Crusades, the Inquisition, and the countless other evils that can be attributed to its inception, the idea may actually appear less far-fetched than the traditional Christian interpretation. Christian scholars have interpreted the Lucifer-Jesus connection in various ways. A common rebuttal to their conflation invokes the following passage to claim that there is more than one morning star. And the quote is this, whereupon are the foundations therefore thereof fastened? Who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. And that's from Job 38:6. However, this contradicts the quote given earlier, the one that says the one morning star is described as if there are no others. Furthermore, there is only one Venus, although when the planet overtakes Earth's orbit, it does begin to appear at a different time in the night. The Bible is no stranger to contradiction, so we may never know which interpretation is true. Other scholars claim that the Bible verse in which the morning star is cast from heaven, which is in Isaiah, is not allegorically, but is literally referring to King Etana of Babylon. This introduces the question of why Hebrew authors would want to describe this king as a divine celestial being. Morning star is more precisely attributed to an angel, not a king they despised. Finally, there is the parable in which Jesus spends 40 days fasting alone in the desert. He is tempted 3 times by Satan, suggesting that they are 2 separate beings. However, wise men often wandered into the wilderness to find their true selves by overcoming inner demons. Indeed, no one is recorded as having witnessed the meeting, so it is quite possible that Satan symbolized a side of Jesus that had to overcome or challenged in some ways. And this came from an article it's called, If Jesus and Lucifer Are One, Does That Mean That Jesus is the Great Deceiver? Lucifer as Jesus Christ. Perhaps the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he was God. Indeed, what better way to get revenge on a benevolent God than to find a religion that does great evil in his name? This shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, and what they're referring to is this quote. We get back to this 1,000 years business again. Hold on a second. Okay, here's this quote. And when the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations that are at 4 corners of the earth. And that's Revelations 20:7. And no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. And that's for Corinthians 11:14. Even the Bible foretold that Satan would deceive the world by masquerading as an angel of light. We are told that Satan is a tempter, a trickster, and a dealer in chicanery and illusion. Would he appear as the beast or as the answer to our prayers? Jesus found a poor and squalid land and used miracles and charitable acts to become the people's Messiah. He profited from the misery of the masses and did nothing to end their suffering on a permanent basis. Instead, he claimed that our sins would be forgiven if we pledged our souls to him. And this is critical, okay? Because this is the great heist of our souls right here, exactly right here. Because when you pledge yourself to Jesus so he can take care of your sins, what you're really doing is you're giving your soul to these satanic monsters running things. And let me read that once more again. Jesus found a poor and squalid land and used miracles and charitable acts to become the people's Messiah. He profited from the misery of the masses, but did nothing to end their suffering on a permanent basis. Instead, He claimed that our sins would be forgiven if we pledged our souls to him. Even murderers and rapists can ascend to paradise by selling their souls to Christianity. That, to me, is what this is all about. Come to Jesus, come to Jesus, give us your soul, give us your soul. They want your soul is what they want. So yeah, they trick you into these churches. They get you to start chanting all this stuff. They get you to let demons enter your life. And then pretty soon you're convinced that the only way you're going to get out of this mess is through Jesus. But Jesus extracts, to me, this is my opinion. I think to give up your soul over sins to Jesus is a pretty crazy deal. For example, recently I was talking about a lot of people have been entrapped. I mean, not always in horrible ways, because even before the Presidio daycare scandal during the satanic panic deal in the 80s, the U.S. military, there were other bases involved before they got caught at Presidio. Those other bases just didn't get publicized. They have literally been using most all of us to jab and experiment with, myself included. So it should not come as a surprise that they're the evil perpetrators, right? They're the ones giving people drugs and stuff to get them to engage in illicit sins, right? Well, people on drugs and stuff aren't really a true consenting participant, number one, right? So these people do the simple, easy tricks. How hard is it to slip something in someone's drink, get them to engage with a child or something, photograph them, and then you got that over their heads forever? I keep thinking, I wonder how many people are out there that truly got trapped. I'm not talking about these people that sign up to go to these castles and stuff. I'm talking about people that are hanging out with these people and they think they're going to get up their ladder and get involved in all this money. And so they want to do what they're doing, see how it all goes. And so they come to these parties, and each party escalates more and more as time goes on. So people have had enough drinks and stuff, and then you might stay for part two by mistake, and then pretty soon, before you know it, they've got some pictures of you doing something which you really never did because you're out of your mind against your own consent on drugs. So it wasn't like you cruised into the party and you thought, hey, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take a lot of drugs and I'm going to rape a bunch of children. You probably went in there with the idea that I need to get ahead in my career and all of these elite people are here, right? So to better my career, I probably should attend this reception. Hey, I did the work that I did was organizing receptions and events and big trade shows and stuff. So that is exactly how it works. You know, you go to a trade show and you get invited to different things afterwards, different events and stuff. And yes, there's alcohol there. So yeah, I could see how people could easily get slipped into some kind of a slippery trap. So I was thinking last night when I was doing my sitting spell, I was thinking, wow, what happens if, let's say that, um, let's say that now I don't think this happened, but let's say that somebody did something, right? I don't think it happened because I'm making up a fake example. So let's say, for example, you go to this party and you get tricked into, you take a drink. The drink's got drugs in it, right? They probably let you drink alcohol in the first part of the thing. The next phase of the party, they're probably handing out the heavier drugs, right? The ones that make you go into a coma and stuff. And this is all, keep in mind, this is all without your consent. Okay. So I thought, wow, I wonder what would I do in a case like that? Well, here's what I would do. I would act like nothing. I would act like I didn't catch on to anything, right? I would not go and confide in my friends and stuff and say, hey, I just realized this. No, keep it to yourself. You don't know who's who within your organization, so you keep it to yourself, okay? People have got to get rid of this idea of putting everything on blast, okay? So what I would do is I would keep it to myself and I would plot. I would have a plan. And I would escalate my position to the point that I became invaluable to them, right? Invaluable and someone they would trust with a microphone in my hand. And then when the time was right and I had that microphone in my hand and the thing was live, I would move into slowly saying what I was going to say. And I would choose my words carefully. I used to do some coaching of people in different events and stuff. So what you do is you choose your words carefully and you consider every word to be a possible soundbite down the road. So you don't launch into this huge long diatribe. You have to actually manipulate and control your message. So what you want to do is make it so it's all ready to be sound bit. You don't launch into this huge thing and wander around because A, they might tackle you from the stage, and B, you want to have your words clearly heard by the people who hear you on that live microphone. So you need to have it planned out. So let me get back to here because, yeah, this is a big deal. Because they say right here, even murderers and rapists can ascend to paradise by selling their souls to Christianity. Yeah, they cooked up these horrific things, these sins, all these horrible, all these things they call sex acts, but they're really sadistic torture, right? They did all this. So then they come in for the rescue, right? Hey, we sold you on this idea of raping kids and all this stuff. You all went along with it, but it's okay. We got you covered here. Come to us and we'll relieve you of your sins. And at the same time, we'll just take your soul. Wow, pretty big deal, right? So let me keep reading here. For those without a predilection for Christian dogma, this interpretation may be just as plausible or implausible as the Christian version. Indeed, many believe the religion spawned by the mythical figure is the source of numerous evils. Those who deny these evils use deception to prevent their discovery, while heaven and hell are wielded to tempt or threaten those who are too vulnerable or desperate to care. But then that's just what Lucifer would have wanted, isn't it? And another quote, I know if Lucifer is Christ, then of course he would have thousands of mirrors around him during that point. Christ wasn't vain. And here we got that thousands of mirrors. I don't know where that comes from. So, another quote, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. And they went on to say, see, Christians misinterpret this and think that Lucifer was the highest angel who then became prideful and rebelled, resulting in him being cast down. But I want you to notice something. Isaiah 14 isn't dealing with celestial angels. It is about a prophecy regarding the children of Jacob. Now go back to Isaiah 14 to 12 but read the verses 15 and 16. Notice how in 16 it says, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms? Why would they be calling Lucifer a man if he is a spirit? Why didn't they say he was an angel? Because Lucifer is basically a name used for the ruler of Babylon, not the name of a spiritual being. And this is where it got interesting, right? The prophecy is therefore about the human king of Babylon, who is described as Lucifer. On his fall, it says, they that shall see shall consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble? Thus, Lucifer is clearly defined as a man. Lucifer was a human king. All kings of the nations shall speak and say until thee, art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? Lucifer was therefore a king like any other king. There's a good reason why the king of Babylon is described as the morning star or Venus. The Babylonians believed that their king was the child of their god Bel and Ishtar, both of whom were associated with the planets. They thought that the king was the planet Venus. The passage about Lucifer is referencing a Babylonian myth. Hail, Heylel, the morning star, Venus, tried to climb the walls of the northern city of the gods to make himself king of heaven, only to be driven from the sky by the rising sun. In Isaiah, this myth is given a historical application. Isaiah is mocking the myth and saying that the king of Babylon was acting like Halon in the myth, but would be thrown down not by another planet, but by the Almighty himself. There was no devil or Jesus in Judaism until they went to Persia. There they got Jesus and the devil from Zoroastrianism. Any Jew knows this. Satan is the great deceiver and has deceived about half of the world. The word Babylon means confusion. Boy, what a bunch of confusion, right? In the Bible, the name appears as Babel, Babel, and it's interpreted from the book of Genesis to mean confusion. In contrast, Babylon, according to, is also used talking about geography instead of mythical stories. So yeah, I think it's pretty clear. It makes sense to me. Now, the reason I'm sharing my work is so that I've got all the links down below, and let me tell you what those are, because the whole idea is once I get it, then I try to share with you, and then hopefully you will spend the time to get it further yourself. So what do I have down below? Let me see here. I'm going to be talking in a minute about flamenco dancers. Oh, boy, do I have a good one on that. Carmen Amaya, the greatest flamenco dancer. And hear this part very carefully. The flamenco dancers come from the gypsies, okay? Carmen Amaya, the greatest flamenco dancer and first woman to master footwork reserved for males. 1944. Well, because Carmen, get it? Carmen was a man. So, of course, she was able to master footwork reserved for males. So, I believe up until 1944 era, most of the flamenco dancers were, in fact, men. And Carmen was the first one that could dance like the men. Well, because Carmen is actually a man. And the name says it all, right? Carmen. Okay, so what else do I have down there? Because I'll be talking about that in a minute here. And then I have all these articles about the discovery of America by the Moors 6 centuries before Christopher Columbus. And that has a lot of details in it that I'm not going to go into. If you miss that one, you're going to be missing a lot. So it's the discovery of America by the Moors 6 centuries before Christopher Columbus. The Forgotten Cause of the Civil War, when black men ruled the world. I found this interesting thing, the aging of the Moors. And it's from this thing called the Chicago Reader. And it's an interesting story. It says 80 years ago, a prophet came to the south side of Chicago and drew thousands of followers. And so, yeah, it's an old piece, and I'm not going to be reading the piece. it's more or less a story that somebody told about these prophets and stuff. Is it true? Likely most of it is, but I would encourage you to take a look at it. And you'll be hearing about Granada land, the promised land of Israel, the discovery of America, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let me see here. Catholic Church was always crypto Jews, white slavery in America, world crime syndicate. And then what I've done is I'll be going through this article in a bit here. And this article is very well documented. And it's about when the Moors here in America, and actually, it's interesting because the early Moors here in America were actually those Indian tribes. So, yeah, those Indian tribes. And so what I did was that I copy and pasted that entire piece down below because it's really well documented. And what they do is they say, okay, this is the thing where they got this land from the Moorish temple or something. And then they say, here's the link for that. And so then they give you the link for that. So each step along the way, they give you the link for what they're talking about, which is pretty important because this is pretty new and kind of radically new stuff for most of us, at least. So, because they talk about how they got the different names and it's interesting. And because the Constitution, for example, is derived from the Great Law of Peace, which is a royal Muslim law of the ancient Berbers, who were given the misnomer as Indians after 1621 when the word Indian was substituted for Moorish. With this single altercation, the original text was again transcribed in 1703. So yeah, this is a word trick in a lot of ways, right? They're lawyers and stuff. They write these tricky things in for words. So yeah, it is very well documented. And it says, like, for example, I have noticed that most of the old maps prior to 1492 show Moorish territories and dominions in the Americas. And then they say, and this 1941 map is a perfect example of Moorish territory prior to 1492. And they say the year 1492 marked the start of the conquest of the Moors. And they say, notice on the 1941 map, all of the names of these Berber Indians, which were the Moors, their names were Semoles, Cacachals, Cherokee, Creek, Chickasaws, Masaki, Iroquois, Shawnees, Pocahontas, Delaware. Anyways, all these Indian tribes, the Mohawks, and many more Indian tribes that they did not name, but you could see them on this 1491 map in this post. Some of these tribes were major Indian tribes. So who can say that the Moors were not indigenous when the Moors were also Indians from India Superior? So yeah, there's just a lot to this stuff. So I will be covering this in a bit here, but what I decided to do was just to paste the entire page because it is just full of information because they go into how the Confederate flag came from the Moors. The first slave owner in America was Anthony Johnson, and he was a Moor, a black person. We had black Confederate generals and soldiers that were fighting in this war. Yeah, there were black people all over this thing, all over that Civil War. So I'll be getting back to that in a bit. But what I decided to do was I just posted it all down below. So if you take a look at it on my webpage, it'll make it easier to read. Okay, so let's get back here. So yeah, in the Bible, the name appears to be Babel, and this all means confusion. Yeah. And then in this one piece I was reading, they said that the suffix BEY was tacked onto their last names to signify which tribe of the medieval Moors they were descended from. And this is interesting because then it goes on to say other new members. So I guess the original Moors, if you find them through the history and stuff, if you dig around for yourself, The original group will have Bay, B-E-Y, attached to their last names. But the new members have that E-L or A-L-I. Because remember, even that guy from Syria has that E-L in his name. So obviously, part of that group, right? So, last point here. Lucifer would not shed anything for anyone. Lucifer wants to be in charge, so he probably wouldn't have been born in the poorest type of individuals he could find. Arrogance toward items to support superiority. Would never shed anything for anyone. Yeah, okay. So anyway, so let me get back here. So what do people say about prior to 1492? Well, here's some thoughts. Prior to 1492, America, or Americana, was a sustainable paradise. There were paved roads, beautiful castles, and more. And this is probably where all those big castles and ornate places came from, right exactly here. So prior to 1492 was a sustainable paradise. There were paved roads, beautiful castles, and more. It was the home of the Asiatic, aka Nagas, Nagas. They were labeled Negro, Niggas, black, colored, etc., to strip them of their human rights. And they say the Indian slave trade predates the African slave trade. Hidden history will reveal the Indian slave trade was far more horrific than the African slave trade. The survivors were taken as prisoners of war. They were crammed on ships and sold in other parts of their land, and most died during the voyage from disease. The untold story is not to overshadow the crimes of the African slave trade. Well, I don't believe that's true, but it also to reveal the truth who the American nationals, kings, and queens of America were. The Moors, and here's where I think they really tricked the deal, okay? Because I've been thinking for a long time because all this talk about the Moors, they're always talking about, oh, they're just so intellectual, oh, so smart. And that kept striking me as how a psychopath would present themselves, right? Oh, is the best, the greatest, the most wonderful, right? So let me read this piece. The Moors brought enormous learning to Spain that over centuries would percolate through the rest of Europe. The intellectual achievements of the Moors in Spain had a lasting effect. Education was universal in Moorish Spain, while in Christian Europe, 99% of the population was illiterate, and even kings could neither read or write. And let me interject this, because where we come from, we did not read or write. We actually telepathically communicated. So, yeah. So, were 99% of the population illiterate, or were they using telepathic skills? I don't know. At the time when Europe only had 2 universities, the Moors had 17, located in Almeria, Cordoba, Granada, Jaén, Malaga, Seville, and Toledo. In the 10th and 11th centuries, public libraries in Europe were non-existent, while Moorish Spain could boast more than 70, including one in Cordoba that housed hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. Universities in Paris and Oxford were established after visits by scholars to Moorish Spain. It was this system of education taken to Europe by the Moors that seeded the European Renaissance and brought the continent out of the 1,000 years of out of the 1,000 years of intellectual and technology gloom of the Middle Ages. Well, this is according to their story, right? They want to paint us as apes and all kinds of other stuff, right? So, so why would they be so clever with all these books? Well, because they were establishing their big takeover now, right? They got the jump start publishing all the books. At least that's how it struck me, that it wasn't because they were so smart, it was because they were so clever, right? Maybe we didn't need to read books, right? I mean, there's always that possibility. So that's maybe why we didn't have books. So they were the ones who said we should have books. Why was that? Well, so they could print up lies. So we would say, oh, yeah, it came from a book. Yeah, I think that's likely the simple answer to all of this stuff. So let me keep going here. Now I'm getting to the part about that big piece that I have pasted down below. The original America Constitution is a trust document, hence the public trust, which is designed to govern public officials who are actually trustees for the heirs of the vast Moorish estate known as Amaru, Washington. The Moors, aka the Ancient Ones or Mound Builders. The Washington Moors are the oldest indigenous people on the planet, according to the UN nations. The Moorish Science Temple of America is a religious trust created by Prince Noble Drew Ali of the Washita Empire. Yes, Noble Drew Ali was a prince of the Washita Empire. His mother, Eliza Turner, was an heir of the Turner or Tunica royal family. The land that Prophet Noble Drew Ali put into trust belonged to his own family, the Turners. This is why the Turners never undid what the Prophet did, because it was something the Prophet did to protect our land. The Turner royal family surname, or Tunica, is derived from Tunis, Tunis. For example, Turner equal Tunica equal Tunis equal Tennessee. Tunis is a Muslim country in North Africa that was established by the Carthaginians. The Carthaginians were a branch of the Phoenicians. And they said Tennessee is actually Tunis. And they have a link there to show you exactly why. Tunis, a once wealthy port city, is famous for having been one of the sites of the ancient Phoenician civilization and was a premier destination for travelers heading to Carthage. Carthage, Tennessee. North America has 15 Carthage place names, which suggests that Grand Tunis and Grand Phoenicia were in the Americas. Yes, the Phoenicians are from the Americans, and they have another well put together piece that tells that backs up everything they're saying here. Carthage, which is Phoenician, meaning new city, was the capital of the ancient Carthaginian civilization on the east side of the Lake of Tunisia, is what is now Tunisia. Carthage was one of the most important trading hubs of the ancient Mediterranean and most affluent cities of the classical world. The Constitution is derived from the great law of peace, which is royal Muslim law of the ancient Berbers, the Washita Moors, who were given the misnomer as Indians after 1621, when the word Indian was substituted for Moorish. With this single altercation, the original text was again transcribed in 1703. And they show you some maps. They say, this is the image of a 1491 map. And they say barbarous is just a descriptive word for barbarians, which is just code word for Berber, especially since we know that the vowels are interchangeable with ancient Semitic languages. Therefore, Barbarus can be easily converted to Berberus, which were Turks/Moors. The Spanish considered the Circassians or the Moors uncivilized barbarians because of their belief in Islam. And they went on to say, I have noticed that most of the old maps prior to 1492 show Moorish territories and dominions in the Americas. And they give you some examples. And they show that, notice on the 1491 map, all the names of these Berber Indians or the Moors are things like Simolees, Cherokee, Creeks, Iroquois, Shawnees, Delaware, Mohawks, all of the Indian names that we know, right? And many more Indian tribes that they did not name, but you can see them on the 1491 map in this post they have there. Some of these tribes were major Indian tribes. So who can say that the Moors were not indigenous when the Moors were also Indians from India Superior? And they refer to India Superior as the Americas. These said tribes were predominantly Algonquin tribes, since they spoke Algonquin languages. The prefix of AL in Algonquin is interesting, since AL is a Moorish surname, and it is a feminine form of EL, which means God, force, or power. And that's why they call themselves elites. They consider themselves gods over the rest of us. The prefix of AL in Algonquin, AL is a Moorish surname, and the feminine form is EL, which means God, force, or power. Alabama or Illinois Illinois are two U.S. states that also have the AL-EL prefix, since the letter I in Illinois is a vowel that can be substituted with another vowel. El was another Phoenician Canaanite god of the Amorites or the Moors and the pre-Israelites. El is depicted as a black man wearing a golden fez and golden Moorish attire. El eventually became the Hebrew god Yahweh, electricity, elevate, election, elder, and all forms of El. The Algonquin tribe spoke Egyptian, Hebrew, and Arabic are the same language, but only with a different dialect. The indigenous Algonquin tribes spoke Egyptian. The fact that the Algonquin tribes spoke Egyptian is more evidence proving that ancient Egypt was in the Americas. The Moors became the custodians of the Egyptian mysteries when Egypt fell, according to this book, Stolen. Let me see here, wait a second. The Moors became the custodians of the Egyptian mysteries when Egypt fell, according to this book called Stolen Legacy. Moor means a high priest of Anu, according to this book. Further evidence that American Indians are Moors is from this book called The Americas. The descendants of the North American Moors are the present-day Iraqis, blah, 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 Apache, and all those Indian tribes. However, we can also include the Taino, Simolees, Creeks, Chowtais, and all these other Indian tribes, and all of the barbarous tribes east of the Mississippi River were also North American Moors. The rebel flag aka the Confederate flag, is just the flag of the Iraqis' Confederation. The Iraqis' Confederation was part of the Washita Empire. How do I know this? Well, because Prophet Noble Drew Ali's father was John Thompson Drew, and he was a colonel for the Confederate Army. Believe it or not, the Confederate flag is not a symbol of hate and slavery. It's actually the flag of the Orsinian Jesus Christ resurrection, which means being reborn again or resurrected, which is only possible through spiritual practice. Osiris was the holy god Christ in the Egyptian mysteries, and was called Lord of the Perfect Black. Isn't Osiris the reason why they cover up one eye? Osiris is based on a very powerful priest king, dragon king, that lived over 75,000 years ago, named Nimrod or Pharaoh Narmer. Nimrod, a mighty hunter, mighty warrior, was one of the first recorded Black Panthers, aka Messiah, to wear mighty leopard skin, jaguar skin. Nimrod was the first person to ever rule the world. The Confederate flag has been converted into a symbol of hate and slavery to get you to hate your own sign and symbol so that you will not associate yourself with it and be able to claim your Southern heritage to the several Southern states. The first slave owner in America was Anthony Johnson, and he was a Moor. You even had Black Confederate generals and soldiers according to the books, Black Confederate and Black slave owners. How do I explain this? Well, we fought a civil war amongst ourselves for over 20 years before European slaves got involved. The Civil War was between the Iraqi Confederation, the South, versus the Powhatan Confederations of the North. The Civil War was fought over economic concerns for the Union, since the North feared that if the South left the Union, the action would bankrupt the North. Therefore, the Civil War had nothing to do with race or ending slavery. It also had to do with, remember, they wrote that clause when they said they freed the slaves. We got tricked into all becoming slaves by that clause they wrote. So, of course, there's that. So, they also have several videos here to take a look at. The problem is most of these videos are dead and don't have anything on them. But if you want to become a future blogger, here's what I suggest you do. When you put videos on your blog that you're writing, make sure you anchor them in, meaning convert them so they will always be there. So even if YouTube takes the video down, it will always be secure on your site. How do I know this? Well, because I store videos when I find them, really telling videos, more gossip channel videos. Like if I find a video about Kamala Harris and her penis is dangling, well, I make a copy of that video, but I make a copy of it so when I post it on my website, it will never disappear. So you won't be reading my website and won't say video removed. So if you want to put YouTube videos on your blogs, anchor them in is what I'm suggesting. So I don't know if this video is there, but here it says, because I checked them and a lot of them are gone. But anyway, this video they're talking about, the Black Southern Confederacy, straight up demonstrates that Jefferson Davis, Alexander Stephens, and General Robert E. Lee were Moors. They were all Black that fought for the South to defend their way of life. Jefferson Davis was the president of the Southern Confederacy, and his vice president was Alexander Stephens. Robert E. Lee was the general for the Southern Confederacy. These men were all Black men. that fought for the South during the Civil War that started in 1861 and lasted 4 years until 1865. So, yeah, Robert E. Lee, our most famous general, was a black man. You had more whites in slavery than blacks in the South because Moors owned the South. The Cherokees were the Moors, who was the last. So they have this person called Muslim Moor, the last Cherokee chief, and they owned European slaves. We have another post for you to take a look at to verify that. To be a white slave was to be a Muslim slave, according to Slavery, Indentured Servitude, and Race Book. And there again, another YouTube video, but don't be disappointed if it's not there. I'm just leaving all these links intact. I'm not going to go through and ratchet through them all, but yeah, don't be surprised if you go to click on some of these YouTube video links and there's no video to watch. They go on to say, in this post is a comparison image between 1861 state flag of South Carolina and the 1844 flag of the Ottoman Empire. So 1844 flag of the Ottoman Empire versus the 1861 state flag of South Carolina. As you can see, both flags are Islamic and are almost identical to each other. Yes, South Carolina was part of the Ottoman Empire, since Carolinas was once Turkey. The 1861 state flag of South Carolina proves that South Carolina was ancient Turkey, since it is almost identical to the state flag of Turkey and the flag of the Ottoman Empire. And then they have another video that says, they say in this video, it says the untold cost of the Civil War. And there's this book that you can get for about $1,000, and they say this book explains how the Civil War was not fought to end slavery, since the North had their own slaves. According to this book, the Civil War was caused due to economic concerns, and where I talked about that. Yes, it was the North who needed imports from the South to fuel their economy. So it was the North that started the Civil War by bombing Fort Sumter, and not the other way around, because it was the North who needed the South. Desperate people have always been known to do desperate things. The Confederate flag banner is almost identical to the state flag of Turkey, the flag of the Ottoman Empire, and the 1861 state flag of South Carolina, which are Islamic states, since the said flags all have cherry red backgrounds with the Islamic crescent moon and star on them. This suggests that the South were indeed Moors or Turks, aka the seed of Isham, the son of Abraham of the Bible. The Somali nation and the Creek nation were blood allies that also fought for the South during the Civil War, since they were also Moors. The 1861 pro-Confederate flags of the Creek and Seminole nations are almost identical, featuring that crescent moon. In addition, they said that further proof the Moors, Turks ran the South, they have this dissertation that from 1860. Additionally, we have the state name of Alabama to consider, which is of Arabic origins, since the Islamic god Allah is in Alabama or Alabama. All of this evidence is undeniable proof that the Moors ran the South and were here way before Christopher Columbus. You ever heard of the Daughters of the American Revolution, or DAR? Well, DAR were the white slave women that were the concubines for the Moors in their Moorish havens. Now, DAR has become an elite secret society of white women, and they still do wear the Moorish fez that the Moors let her wear after we breed her and raised her up from an animal state. Google Moorish harem for more evidence on this. Yes, you see, our slavery is always talked about, but white slavery is never talked about. The original Constitution was the first 10 amendments. The number 10 is perfection, and it also means resurrection or rebirth. 10 is also the unification of male, female energies to create life. The human form is based off of 10, which is also the binary programming code for computers, ones and zeros. The human form has 10 fingers and 10 toes. The word constitution is derived from the word constitute, which means to form a body, make up a body, and or to compose. The Constitution is a body of natural laws / God's laws. The word amendment is derived from the Black Egyptian god Amun, or Amen, A-M-E-N, which means hidden source of power, or so be it. The suffix of amendment, or meant, means to make publish or make known. Meant, M-E-T, is also the root word for mental. The word amendment I define as meeting the hidden law, hidden power made flesh, or the hidden source revealed. Yes, law is very philosophical because real law is philosophy. Attorneys don't learn this type of information in law school because they are not real lawyers. Attorneys are military agents or knights for the Vatican, Queen of England, or the Eagle Rome. But they all learn in law school, and all they learn in law school is theories based on statutes and codes. Most attorneys don't even learn procedure until after they finish law school and start reading case law on their own. So yeah, that makes sense because they grill into them all these statutes and codes, which they use to directly control the rest of us, right? So they go on to say, in this YouTube video, when white supremacists overthrew a government is how white supremacy overthrew our governments everywhere in the Americas. Yes, Moors were the prominent, rich, liberal Republicans at first because the Americas were our homeland, and we started the first governments and business or commerce in the Americas. In this post is images of Black Republican U.S. senators and Black Republican U.S. presidents. And yeah, it's pretty interesting because they show pictures of Black people that were serving. According to the evidence, Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Johnson, Ulysses S. Grant, Rutherford B. Hayes, James A. Garfield, they go through this whole list. Franklin Pierce and James Buchanan were all so-called Black men. These said men were all former U.S. presidents. This information does not surprise me because our first U.S. president was a Black man named George Washington. And I talked at a show recently. J. Edgar Hoover is, in fact, Black, right? I posted that link in the last couple shows, but yeah, got a lot of Black people running around, pass themselves off as white, right? Abolitionist John Brown was also a Black man that fought to end white slavery in the South. So they have another image there. So they have all these pictures of these people. I've looked at them all. It's interesting stuff. It says, I have included some of those images in this post, but you all still need to read that link though, because it is a good read. Best known for civil portraits, they have this person. And I said, what if, let me see here, if so-called, blacks weren't slaves, white people were. The overthrow did not just happen in North Carolina. This happened to Moors everywhere in the late 1800s and early 1900s, because even after all of the first major land grabs of our lands, we still had the majority of the American land. This event happened in 1898 in Wilmington, North Carolina. You see how the poor whites were the Democrats at first. The blacks were the prominent, rich, liberal Republicans at first. And remember, I did that show about Black Wall Street. Well, this explains why we had a Black Wall Street. And don't forget what they do there. Well, they firebombed all those people. And say, yes, white Europeans have switched places with the Moors. White people were even black or pale at first, and Moors were white, pure races. White Europeans took the title of white after the 1870s Reconstruction Act. White people just recently started calling themselves white with the Naturalization Act of 1790, which was amended in 1870. And I have more, I'll get back to more about this Anglo business, because now that we're talking about the Anglican Church of England, well, it fits into here, but let me keep reading here. They say, white is a status. It has nothing to do with color. And it says, please look up free white persons in the Black's Law Dictionary. The Democrats were the Klansmen that got jealous and took everything, which is the custom of the jealous poor Europeans. The same happened during the Red Summer of 1990, which is considered to be a riot when it was a race war. More examples of this jealous European behavior are Black Wall Street and Rosewood, all of which were prominent blackamoor establishments that were destroyed by jealous poor whites. Yeah, now that show that I did about Black Wall Street certainly makes a lot more sense. I'll keep reading. The evidence provided in this post proves beyond doubt that the Moors used to be the Republicans, because the de jure Republican belonged to the Moors, Hebrews, Indians, Egyptians, all one of the same people. How do you explain this? Well, the Moors owned over 80% of America all the way up to the Red Summer of 1913, which is listed as a riot when it was a race war over land. Moors were driven from their lands and were killed for their lands. The cause of the Great Depression was when the Moors, who owned most of the banks during this point in time, had stopped doing business with the United States. Also around this time, Prophet Noble Drew Ali had put 75% of the America landmass, which is Washita territory, in a religious trust. The Moors that owned banks and the Prophet pulled out of the United States corporation around the same time. So best believe that was a coordinated financial war that our ancestors had waged, which caused the Great Depression. If these Moors were freed slaves, how do you explain their rise to power in such a short period of time during these racist times? Yes, your history is a lie, and it means his story, because he won the war and wrote the book in his image. Every historian needs to be arrested, charged with treason, and then shot. Why do people hate Moors? The hate of Moors stems from popular people banging on the Moors like young Pharaoh, Dan Calloway, In fact, you were all fed misinformation about the Moors since it came from the people who were biased toward the Moors due to a lack of knowledge on their end. Moor means land, according to Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. Moor also means light and guardians of Osiris. Ethiopian Superior, aka Abyssinia, the Americas, was called Morinland, according to definition, which makes perfect sense because Tamari means the land of the Maors. And they point another reference, evidence that America is Ethiopia Superior or Tamari, the land of the Moors or the country of the Moors, can be found in this blog, and I gave you the link. The Moors were running the American government as the Continental Congress up until the real George Washington, a black man, was murdered and replaced by Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Illuminati. So, pretty significant. They said the Moors were running the American government as the Continental Congress until the real George Washington, a black man, was murdered and replaced by Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Illuminati. And that was Adam Weishaupt that made the interesting comment about removing the fezzes and the sandals of the Moors. And the link is right there to take a look. The real George Washington was a Moor that was put in power by the Moors, because if you create a government, the United States, like the Moors did, you put one of your own in power to oversee your creation. When the Moorish government was overthrown by George Washington, aka Adam Weishaupt, when he chopped down his father's cherry tree, the cherry tree that Adam Weishaupt or George Washington chopped down was Old Glory, the Moroccan flag. George Washington is documented saying, if we would agree to take the fezzes and turbans off the Moors' heads and remove the sandals from their feet and enforce it with severe punishments, and also swear a death oath between ourselves to religiously and faithfully, fully not allow anyone to teach the Moorish children who they really are or who their forefathers were. Sounds like a pretty obvious plot line if you ask me, and that was George Washington. Take off their fezzes and turbans, right? We're going to have to figure out, but not today, is who are the good guys and the bad guys in this picture? I'm getting a little confused, but let me just keep going here for now. And only allow the Moorish children to be taught that they were truly Negroes, black people, and colored folks. George Washington stated that 200 years from today, the Moorish people would not know their nationality nor the national name of their forefathers. Also, they would not know from which land or ancestors that they descended from. And they also have another post. They say, in this post, a $100 U.S. gold coin of the original Statue of Liberty. This gold coin was approved in 2017 as the official U.S. currency. Yes, the original Statue of Liberty was the image of a Moorish black Muslim woman. The image of the Moor's head is very powerful in history, and it served as a family brand or logo. And I don't know, the Moor's head, well, the Catholics had that Moor's head on their family crest. Lady Liberty is also the ancient Egyptian goddess Isis. So, I don't know. The invasion, people that continue to hate the Moors are either agents or religious zealots for their own personal faith or belief system. The Black European Templar Christians, Catholics, that invaded the Americas were not Moors because they hated Muslims. The invasion was a result of the long series of holy wars, aka crusades, between Muslims and Jews versus Christians and Catholics. Yes, the crusades were fought on both sides of the world, but mostly in the Americas, since America is the promised land. The Americas was Muslim Jerusalem, aka Granada land. Therefore, it is ridiculous to suggest that the Moors willfully invaded their own promised land in the Americas when we have the dumb verses of 1452 issued by the Pope and the Edict of the Dragons issued by the Black Holy Roman Empire, which banned Muslim in the late 1400s, proves that this was certainly not the case, since the Dum Diversas authorized Christian Templars to take land, wealth, and possession of Moors and pagans. So somehow these Christian Templars were authorized to take land, wealth, and the possessions of the Moors and the pagans. And the pagans they're talking about being the Jews and the Hebrews. Okay, well, that certainly gives us a lot to think about. Before I close off here, I want to give you a little bit of gypsy talk. Flamenco comes from the Moors or the Moroccans that ruled Andalusia for about 900 years. The dance comes from North Africa and the Turkish regions of Central Asia, Morocco. The origins of flamenco are one of the hotly debated issues. Flamenco is comprised of three parts: el cante, the song; el toque, the playing of the instruments; el baile, the dance. Originally, it was the traditional dance and music of the Andalusian gitanos, the gypsies. Even though flamenco is still deeply connected to the gypsy culture, many payos or non-gypsies have contributed to expand it both in Spain and overseas. Surely the most internationally known flamenco dancer is Carmen Amaya Amaya, born in Barcelona in 1918. She was known throughout the world for the grit, sensuality, and ethnic expressions of her style, but also being a pioneer in the idea of wearing pants on stage. So up until then, flamenco dancers, well, she wore pants on stage, okay? She enjoyed success in Paris in 1929, at the Universal Exposition in Barcelona in 1930, and in Madrid until the outbreak of the Civil War, which forced her to go into exile to the United States. Carmen Amaya, she died in 1963. Occasionally known as a stage name, La Capitan, was a Spanish Romani flamenco dancer and singer. Carmen was a man. I'm going to play a bit of a tune for her here. We keep circling. Remember these dates, okay? 1492. A lot seemed to take place there. But anyways, I'm going to be closing this off for now. Thank you very much for joining me. Be safe out there, and I will talk with you soon.
Y bueno, no sabía hacer otra cosa que bailar. Ella vivía para eso. Se concentraba en el teatro, llegaba siempre 2 horas antes. Se metían en el camerino, tomaban un café con leche, un cigarrillo, se iba al escenario, pegaba 4 patadas ahí para ver cómo sonaba, se iba otra vez al camerino. Era todo un trance de nervios y de cosas hasta que salía. Cuando salía ya se convertía en otra persona.